who took the time out of their evening to come and get updated on what we're doing with the project. I also want to thank all the committee members who were able to make it tonight, and for all your time and dedication to this project as well. And again, I just want to keep it short and sweet, and let's get going and let you all see what we have going on. So Terry, can you take over?
Thanks, Catherine. Can you guys hear me all right? So welcome. Thank you for coming here for this very important meeting. My name is Terry Hartford. I'm a project manager with Doran Whittier. I'm joined here with a couple of my colleagues, as well as obviously school committee members, building committee members, and members of our design team, TAP A Architects. So I guess the big question that we have is, why are we here? Right? And so for those of you that know or don't know, the administration over the last 12 years has submitted something called a statement of interest to the Massachusetts School Building Authority in an attempt to basically get into their grant program to obtain funding for a high school solution, whatever that may be. Many of you are likely familiar with that program because the Fox Hill School is a part of that. And is receiving, I think, up to, I believe, $30 million in reimbursement for the town to build that new school. Unfortunately, here at the high school, we have not been put into that program, and therefore, you know, the issue still remains. We have a 53-year-old building that has some failing systems, and I think there's an acknowledgement that something must be done. And so last year at town meeting, the meeting members appropriated funding to perform what's called a feasibility study. And that feasibility is something that you would do if you were in the MSBA program. It's what you would do for any capital intensive project. So coming out of town meeting, the building committee was formed. One of their first tasks was to hire an owner's project manager. So they ran a competitive process last November. Through interviews and solicitation, Doran Whittier was appointed. I'm actually the project manager for our company on this particular job. Joining me here tonight is Steve Brown. Steve should be a known figure to some of you that are familiar with the Fox Hill project, because he runs that. We are also the OPM on that job as well. Rachel Rincon is an assistant project manager with me, and it helps me with all matters Burlington. So that's the team here, and you know, I want to, yeah, so we see up there, we're blessed that we have a very qualified, capable building committee, and you see a number of the names up here. A number of them are here today. Just to confirm or provide more detail on that makeup, all 7 school committee members are on the building committee, and then we have representatives of stakeholders, I think, across the entire community of Burlington, including, you know, right here in this building with teachers, administration, parents. We are blessed to have folks from different committees in the town. So we have a really good cross-representation of stakeholders in the community. So after we got hired, one of the first things that we had to do was to run a competitive solicitation to bring on an architect. We did that. That was TAP A Architects. You'll meet Chris and some of his team in a few minutes. Just so folks know who TAP A is, they are very well known in the public school market in terms of building elementary, middle, and high schools across the Commonwealth. So I think, you know, we really have, I think, a very capable team. And if we can just, Chris, maybe go to this slide, yeah. So, you know, it's a real team sport, what we're doing here. And one of the things I wanted to convey to you is, while this isn't an MSBA process or a job, they have a tried and true process to get from a feasibility study to an ultimate building solution. And early on with the committee, we agreed that we would follow that process to ensure that, you know, we got to a solution that was the best outcome for the town and the community of Burlington. And so, you know, we've committed to doing that, and it requires a fair bit of work. And so one of the other first things we did once we started work was to establish a project website, which is right there. So BHSbuildingproject.com is where we hold and keep all documentation associated with the project. So it could be reports, it could be meeting minutes. It's a central repository of information. I encourage you to go there frequently. You also have the ability to effectively ask me a question if you want, and I'll endeavor to get you an answer by going to somebody on the team if I don't know it myself. But it's a nice way to kind of, someone's going to answer your question. Rachel and I, monitor that frequently, and that's a great way of monitoring the process, right? And so the process, what have we been doing? And so this is an outline of what we've been doing. When the architect came on board, we performed a number of existing building surveys, just checking out the systems of this particular building. And so that includes mechanical, electrical, plumbing, safety, security, the structural soundness of the building. And then you start going outside of the building and looking at the facade and the site itself. We have a very challenging site here. For those of you that may not be aware, we are constricted by a number of wetlands. There is ledge. There is a massive elevation change from one end of the building to the other, and you can see that. I imagine most of you know and have been in this building. The streets, there's just a big elevation change. And so, we had to take all of that into account. And then what the designer does is they come up, well, actually, excuse me, I forgot one thing. We then did an educational visioning program, which we do have a video. You're going to see more of that, but that's working with the administration, teachers, staff, parents, students, to come up with what do we want the high school program to be. And we take that information, those strategies, they get transformed into building strategies, right, that we put to the committee. And then from there, we came up with 15 distinct options. And some of those options include an outright renovation of this entire space, addition renovations where we get rid of some of the building, we add new sections, and outright new buildings. And so that's what we've been doing over the course of the last 8 months. And then, Chris, if you could just go to the next one. You'll see on this, I'm really focusing on the next 9 months as to what we're doing. And you'll see terms up here that if you were watching Fox Hill, we have just completed the preliminary design program. That's how we then narrowed down those 15 options down to 5, which is where we're going to spend, I think, a fair bit of time later in this presentation. And we've moved into something called the preferred schematic report, where over the course of the next 3 to 4 months, the design team working with ourselves and the school building committee is going to narrow those options down to one preferred schematic, one preferred design. From there, we will develop a schematic design. That will go to estimators, so that we actually have a firm cost as to what that will be. That ultimately is the tool and the output that we will bring to the school building committee, and then ultimately bring to the town. And we are hopeful that between now and in the fall of next year that we can have a package to put to the town so that people can consider that high school solution. And so that's sort of where we are, and I'm actually going to stop talking for a little bit and introduce you to Chris. We do have a short video that, if you haven't seen, I think is useful in terms of understanding the existing conditions and the educational visioning. And then I'm going to ask a question after we watched the video. We had planned on taking a tour of the building. If that's not the best use of our time, I am happy to then just jump into the options and having Chris take you through all of that. So we'll postpone that decision for a few minutes later, and Chris, I'll just turn it over to you. Again, I want to thank you all for coming. This is a first step. I'm super thankful that BCAT's here, because I know it's difficult to get to evening meetings, but this will be on their website. This will be on our website, so hopefully you enjoy it.
All right, thanks, Terry. So with me tonight is Michaela and David, and they're our project manager and job captain for the project. I'm Chris, one of the principals at TAPE Architects. And what led to this video that we're going to show is a lot of internal investigation with engineers, and we actually had the entire building scanned digitally. And so we've made an entire virtual model where we could study this building in depth. The sheet of paper that was handed out to most of you, if you don't have it, maybe raise your hand. It's a little 11.5 by 11 by 17. That was intended to go with us on the tour, should we go, and you have note sections to take some notes. But in that highlights one of the biggest issues of the building is how many different floor plates are in this building. So our team will hand out, just put your hands up, they'll find you and hand those out. But it highlights one of the big issues of how many floor plates there are in the building. There's not just one second floor, there's 3 second floors that you can't access one from the other. There's several first floors because it cascades down the hill, as Terry said. These are major issues when you start looking at things like accessibilities and how do we manage that specific component, but also daylighting in the building. Like over 50% of the rooms don't have access to natural light. So a lot of these things you'll see in the video, so sit back, enjoy the video for a few minutes, and then we'll be right back with you after this.
Welcome to the second installment of the Burlington High School Feasibility Study video series. In our first video, we discussed just what the feasibility study entails, who is involved, and an outline of the schedules of activities. In this video, we will provide an overview of the existing conditions of the school, highlighting deficiencies in space and systems, and summarizing the findings from the educational visioning sessions. Finally, we'll wrap up by showing the next steps and sharing an exciting community event where you can let your voice be heard about the future for Burlington High School. TAPE Architects and their consulting team have documented a detailed existing conditions plan of the building. By determining the state of the space and the building elements, it can be determined what is working and what needs to be adjusted or replaced to meet the educational goals, as well as provide a safe and healthy learning environment. Burlington High School was constructed in 1971, 53 years ago. The cast concrete construction shows expected wear for its age. From a structural standpoint, there are no major deficiencies, but any addition or renovation to the building would need to meet updated structural codes dependent on the determined project scope. The existing electrical system appears to be original to the building and is far past its recommended replacement age. It will need to be fully replaced. Additionally, there are deficiencies with the emergency power and fire alarm systems, which will require a replacement. Existing lighting is retrofitted and should also be replaced. The building is not fully sprinklered, and a fire suppression system will need to be installed in combustible areas. The HVAC system is natural gas, mostly original to the 1971 construction, and is in various states of disrepair. The science classroom exhaust and air systems have failed and are no longer functioning. Controls have degraded over time. They are not maintainable due to unavailable replacement parts. They have many air leaks and have left the building with little to no control in most areas. The building's plumbing shows several key deficiencies in areas that do not meet modern code requirements. Updating the water system would also improve accessibility and conservation standards. Civil engineering has identified several areas of concern. The current stormwater management system does not appear to adequately mitigate large rainfall events. This will require upgrades to meet modern state standards to mitigate and treat stormwater as it flows to adjacent wetlands. For parking and sidewalk considerations, the existing driveway is in poor condition and parking spaces and lanes are oversized, resulting in less parking spots than required. A building project will need to meet current accessibility requirements for pedestrian routes, including ramps, handrails, and parking. Due to the extreme slope on the site, there are several outdoor areas that are not properly accessible. The fields and stadium are in good condition. However, there are drainage issues on the practice field. There are several instances of asbestos, lead, PCB, and mercury discovered in the expected areas of a building of this vintage. While they do not pose an immediate threat if undisturbed, any renovation or removal of the materials would require appropriate remediation. The IT, technology, and security systems of Burlington High School are in various states of adequacy. In general, they are undersized for an expansive building and site like Burlington High School. Any building project would need to incorporate a more robust security and access control plan and delivery, as well as provide technology suitable for 21st century education. From April to June, the design team, led by David Stephen from New Vista Design, held educational visioning workshops with teachers, administrators, students, and parents. These were held virtually and in person. During the workshops, participants were led through a step-by-step visioning process aimed at capturing their high-level thinking about Burlington High School's current and future educational goals and priorities, and connecting them to best practices and possibilities in innovative school design. The results of these sessions include a list of priorities and considerations that will be used in the development of building options. They consist of educational, architectural, and community priorities. The detailed results and reports can be viewed on the project website. 6 guiding principles were developed by the visioning workshops to provide a framework for priorities: personalization and ownership, collaboration and connection, STEM, art integration, and hands-on learning, flexibility and adaptability, outdoor connections, and the school as a community resource. Some other overarching priorities include inclusivity and welcoming. That is, creating a building that feels welcoming to all members of our increasingly diverse community. Modern learning environment. That is, upgrade our facility to become a 21st century, state-of-the-art new building that accommodates all types of programs. Collaborative and interdisciplinary learning spaces. Better health and support service spaces. A building that can be better used by and meet the needs of the Burlington community. Accessible spaces that are connected to the outdoor natural environment. Adequate sports and recreation facilities and fields. Space and equipment that supports all types of programs. While it is impossible to list all of the project priorities, we will conclude with several educational and architectural priorities, the full summary of which can be found on the Burlington High School project website. Some of which include real-world learning, including project-based learning and life skills, innovation and flexibility, environmental quality of spaces, connection to the outdoors, and natural light, safe community use and access, and spaces for student support. On Thursday, September 26th, the Burlington community is invited to the Town Center Beer Garden and Local Business Fest to meet the project team and have an open conversation about the high school feasibility study. The event takes place at the Community Corner Pocket Park at 202 Cambridge Street from 4:30 to 8:30 p.m. This is your opportunity to provide comments and ideas for the high school. This is an open-ended, informal conversation, so bring your thoughts, hopes, and ideas for the discussion. At the conclusion of the preliminary design program report, the project team will share its preliminary concepts for review. The next step, the preferred schematic report, analyzes the shortlist of each option and concludes with a single recommended path forward for the town and high school. These reports and findings will be developed and delivered in the fall of 2024 and the winter of 2025. Thank you for your involvement as we create the future Burlington High School for Burlington students and community.
I think we'll go old school on this. Would people prefer just to continue the presentation? Or so continue the presentation, raise of hands. Walking around the building. So here's what I'm going to suggest, and I've talked to Dr. Conti about this as well. This is the first step in this process, and we're going to have open houses here to be able to walk the space. That's like, we're going to be doing that, especially depending on how we develop our options. So I'm going to suggest that we allow Chris more time to demonstrate what the design team has been doing. And I would also, this is an active discussion, so if you have a question or you're not following something, please just raise your hand and get that question out there, because you know this is an interactive thing. We need feedback, and questions are a form of feedback. So I encourage you to do just that. I can actually pass the microphone around if that's easier. So with that, Chris, can I turn it over to you? Oh, thank you.
Sorry, we already watched it once. You can actually watch that video and the first one in the series. I think those are on YouTube or the building site, one of the two. But you can find them if you want to watch them again. The community listening session that you heard us reference, although that has passed, was a great event, and we actually heard a lot of good things from the community, which affected some of the options that we're going to show you tonight. So the listening sessions do work. We are listening. We are hearing you. And so when there'll be several more opportunities for those. And so when they come up, whether you're in this room or online or watching somewhere else, we invite you to come to those, because we do want to hear the voices of you all. So the site tour we were going to take you through references this plan. You have these in front of you right now. But sort of just the highlight you can see there is that there's that's 8 first floors on the left, and then 2 second floors on the right. And the second floors you can't get to one from the other. I kind of mentioned this a minute ago. The connection between the floors on the first floor is all not per accessibility codes now. And it's all built out of rock solid concrete. So like to adjust any of it is a pretty big task. You can do it, but it's a lot of work to do. And then the little building section on the right there kind of shows you how the building is cascading down the hill. And when you get down to the very end of the building, the building has dropped in its lowest level by 33 feet from where it started. So that's how you read that diagram. Just as an orientation strategy here, we wanted to show you where you're at in the world. I think in the recent building committee meeting, we realized that we needed to dial back and show people how all of these options relate. So the existing building is labeled there. That's where you're at now. And more refined than that, you are, I don't have a pointer, but the auditorium is just to the right of the bottom of that little existing building bubble. And that's where you're at, kind of between that and the blue dotted line. The student lot out there is identified there, and then the sports field coming in. And those are important markers, because you'll see us propose, or we had proposed previously, some options in all of these areas. Some are still on the table, some aren't. But that's kind of the orienting strategy. When you hear us talk about an off-site building available that we became aware of, It's across Cambridge Street. It's 10 Corporate Drive. That's the address, but it's really, you know, as the crow flies, it's not far from the building, from the high school building itself, but it is a building that's vacant. So when we talk about these options, that gives you a little bit of orientation. If anybody's confused along the way, just raise your hand. I'll try to help orient you to where we're at. So we started the project out by you know, the building is quite large. It's what is like 370,000 square feet, and that's a lot of square footage. The program that we are building to is 1,100 students, which if you translate that out in the space summary results in around 222,000 square feet needed for just a high school program. And so the building is oversized, and you know that because you have already in this building right now, you have non-high school education spaces. So you'll hear us reference those sometimes in these options, and those are things like BCAT and the lab initiatives, Cambridge Street Closet, the preschool program, central administration. All of that stuff's in this building, co-located with the high school, and that's what makes up the rest of the square footage. But the building's large, and we wanted to, instead of diving right into bricks and mortar or architecture, so to speak, and like program, we wanted to think about the building in terms of strategies, because we had this building that had you know, 8 first floors, 3 second floors, and we didn't, it's like, really, how do you break that down and understand it from a kit of parts and what you can take apart in each step to get to a result that you needed to do. And so we developed these strategies. There's 9 of them up there you can see, and the way to interpret this diagram is anything that's yellow would be staying. And anything that is in that blue blob is, the blob is not a shape of architecture, it's just like, this is the area that we would focus on for intervention. And so working your way through the strategies, you can see us go from strategy 1, which is just a renovation of this building. Don't do any new programming, don't really change walls or floors or anything, but just kind of do your best to bring it up to code. And then the next one, strategy 2, is a renovation and addition. And in that one, we were saying, what if we just kept the far end of the building that has the sports in it, the gyms and the locker rooms and things like that, and then tore down everything else and then rebuilt in front of it. And so then that strategy is really saying, well, we don't have to build all the square footage, and the gyms are actually in decent shape. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, rebuild on top of, you can see the underlay, and you know, so tear down everything but the gyms and then rebuild somewhere out there, right? So this is just a strategy, it's not an option, really. It directs where the options would go, but then you can sort of translate that same thinking through all of them, and in bits and pieces we're tearing down or modifying different parts of the building to get to what makes the most sense. And that's 9 strategies for, 9 strategies for addition and renovation, or renovation only. Yes?
Some of these proposals, you're keeping the lowest altitude part of the building and then expanding. Would you be expanding and keeping all 1 floor level? Would you have to be blasting and digging to get down to 133 feet adjustment?
Yeah. So the question is about the dealing with the hill as you're taking off different parts of the site, and that would be true. So anything we do, we're going to try to level out as much as we can, and so we would either go down and take away what's underneath the building, or you would level up and try to go out from there. You know, so we would try to remedy the fact that you've got this problem here right now. We don't want to repeat that, and we want to make it more level and user-friendly. So, yeah. There's all kinds of civil ways you do foundation. I'm sorry? We would manage the on-site drainage working with the wetlands groups. So the question is about drainage. If you go down into the bedrock or the ledge, how do you deal with that? And there's strategies on foundation drains, there's all kinds of stormwater management we would take care of, and that would be built into the project. So, yep. Can I bring a microphone to you? This one.
The stability factor, this space was built on wetlands, is that correct?
There are a lot of wetlands, but you're on ledge as well. So most of this building actually is probably supported on ledge.
And you can blast down on this ledge
Sure.
and not cause any trouble to the homes surrounding the
Nope.
space?
No. And it may not be blasting, it may be chipping. There's all kinds of construction methods. Usually when we have a project that's intensive on that kind of work, it's embedded in the contractor's scope, like they'll do some surveys around buildings that are really close by with video inspection and stuff, so that if some vibration of the earth does cause cracks in their house, we have a before and an after so we can know what was caused what. But contractors don't want that to happen, so they take all the management risks to avoid it. So, yeah.
Just for context, I also wanted to say that there's some background, like the process, anything that moves forward has to go past the Conservation Commission. The town of Burlington has significant stormwater management requirements, and any project would have to pass muster with those. The other thing is that there are 10 strategies listed up there, and Chris is going through them because to show the extent of what's been reviewed and considered, but they're not all continuing on. But because if we just showed you the 5 that we've gotten down to, you'd say, well, why didn't you consider such and such? And so the idea is to show you the process that the school building committee has gone through. So we're reviewing some of these, and some of these won't be, aren't still on the table. So.
All right. Thanks for the comments. We're going to keep going. If there's any comments that come up, let me know. All right, so these are the strategies that led to options. And then these are all the options that resulted out of the strategies. There's a bunch, and it's hard to sort of start to classify these, but the top left is a renovation only, again. And then, and I'll pause for a second and tell you that all of these options were included in the preliminary design program, which is available on the website, if I'm not mistaken. And so you can actually get everything we're showing tonight is available there too. But we're walking through it tonight for your benefit, and you can ask questions. So, yep.
I just want to add to, what Martha said. You can watch all of the meetings and see the discussions that we had and how we got down to the last 5. So there was a lot of discussion and, why we made decisions that we made. You can listen to those. Again, BCAT recorded them. We've got links on the BHSbuildingproject.com. As well as you can go to BCAT to look them up. So again, you can see how much thought went into it and why we made the decision we did.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we have the renovation only. That's what the R stands for in R1. And then we have a series of addition renovation options, which again follow each of these strategies. You've got everything from a lot of takedown and a lot of addition to less addition, more renovation. And so really the first culling here of all of the options resulted in the ones that are selected in red that moved forward for various options. There were some that were long duration with a bunch of modulars, and so that means that we would have to find temporary school for the students, for some students almost the entire duration of their high school career. And the committee thought that was kind of a non-starter, and so we took some of those off pretty early. We could identify that an intensive renovation to this school would have done something like that. And so some of those options fell off for different reasons, and all of those we won't go into tonight, but the ones that stayed were AR2, AR8, AR9, and then a new option, NC1, a new option in NC4 and 5. They're kind of the same strategy. And I'll talk to you quickly about those relative to, do you remember the orientation site plan I showed you before? So everybody's got that little loop road that goes around the existing school that orients you where you're at. These are site plans that sort of identify, these in my opinion are a little bit easier to look at instead of program elements like we showed in the options before. They're kind of a thumbnail view out, zoomed out. You don't really get to what the program is inside, but it at least helps you understand, I can see what's happening with this option, and then we dive into the option specifics as it goes forward. But the AR2 up there was a project that's looking at an addition going basically into the drop-off circle right now. And the strategy there is you can build classrooms first and then move the kids into the classrooms, and then you can start to take down other parts. So it kind of creates swing space that's actually permanent, which is it's a pretty good goal to have, because you can spend millions and millions of dollars in portable temporary school facilities that just at the end of the project get shipped away. And so one of the strategies is to try to build, if you can, you build the new stuff and allow that to be your swing space in, and then it allows you to move around in phases. I'm sorry? Yeah, we would revise the drop-off spot. You can see in AR2. We don't have a laser pointer, do we? No. I think I could do it here. Yeah. So this area right here becomes a new sort of front door and drop-off zone for the school. So we would be reorienting. Yeah, we'll show them in a minute. Yeah. Okay, that should be up there, but we'll make sure it gets loaded up. Yeah. And then AR8 was a similar strategy, but a different shape for the addition is sort of more like a triangle shape with a courtyard in the middle, and that has different implications on program. AR9 is looking at the vacant building across Cambridge Street. And then the new option here, NC1, is looking at building on top of the student parking lot. And then NC4 and NC5 are both looking at putting a new building on the current varsity field stadium and then replacing where we put the field afterwards, which is over here on the right, which the right-hand side would have to go with both NC4 and NC5. And really, yes?
What street would that be? Because we can't see.
That's Arlington.
So it's by Arlington Road?
This is all the same loop road around the building right here.
Yeah, but we can't see it like you can see it.
Okay, this is all the same road that's going around the building right here, and so these little white spots are the existing building.
Yeah, so essentially where you're sitting now would be torn down, and that's where the football stadium would be rebuilt.
Yep. So those are the 5 options that remained. This is looking at them a little bit larger, and again, I'll blow them up even bigger in a second. The NC4 and NC5. That's where we are now, option, the 5 options. So diving a little bit deeper into option AR2, this is the site plan. The white part at the lower left, everybody's with me, right? This is the loop road. You understand the high school layout. The left white part is, you know, it's the cafeteria here, and then central admin is here with the second story. Currently, you're sitting around in this spot right here. as the auditorium, and then the gyms and everything are down on this spot. And so the way that this project works, you can see there's the locust plan there. The way that this option works is everything that's up here in this section would be existing to remain. That means just renovation, and then down here is the non-high school education program that we would also renovate as part of the building. But what's in the middle of the two, we would tear down. But you wouldn't tear that down until you get to build this section, which is a new academic wing that allows you to move the kids over and then take down what's in the middle. And then you ultimately get to the site plan there by creating a more like plaza zone right between the two ends of the building and sort of plug that. This allows us to get to sort of an upper building, which is the existing building, non-high school program, and then a high school program up on the north side of the site, and we can minimize the number of floors because we can kind of match all the way in there.
So that academic wing, 2 stories or 3 stories?
That one is 3 stories, yeah. Yep. Yellow part is existing to remain, so that's the 1 story all the way at the beginning of the building. Yeah, we would renovate it, but not change the structure of it. So, okay, and some of the notes that you need to sort of note on some of these options over here is that you don't really need swing space for this because I just described how we would build that new space, move the kids in. So you don't need temporary facilities. You don't need to spend money on that. But it does have a longer duration time because you've got to do it in phases. So there are a few phases to this, at least 3, maybe more by the time we get through the project. But for now, we're seeing it as 3, and it does have some cons to it, but it also has a lot of pluses too. So, so those are things to kind of pay attention to on these as you read them. The building committee has analyzed a lot of that stuff, and they have more analyzing to do. So here's option AR8. Yeah.
Yep. I did want to bring up too, any part of the buildings that would be left behind that we would renovate will be brought up to code. That was a question that people were asking in our meetings. So again, anything that we leave as a structure will be brought up to code.
Thank you. So AR8 is, again, on the site. Let me just go to the next page and we'll come back to this. So again, keeping, in this plan, similar to the last one, we're keeping the end of the building that has the gyms and fitness centers, and then also trying to keep the auditorium and drama, so this space right here and the spaces right behind it. And, you know, we can try that. That's a little bit different than the other option. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have clicked that. But the difference between these two are really in how we deal with the academic wing on the right, and it's a bit more, there's a bit more pushed into the new build, which is in this zone here. This is actually 3 stories tall, is that right? Okay, 4 technically, because you've got this lower side here, and then this side is from the main entry road here. It would look like 3 stories on this side and then the 4th story over here. So this option actually gets rid of all of the existing building down on this portion, which means it needs to accommodate a bit more non-high school program. And that's what you see, that's kind of the big difference driver between AR2 and AR8. You can see some of that yellow non-high school program. That's where you'll see it pop up in all these options, is the yellow color. It's sort of embedded into the renovation and addition.
So you're planning to keep all of the existing non-high school programs?
Maybe.
Maybe, okay, that was my question, whether you're going to keep all of them, like the BCAT and everything else, if it's possible. Maybe. Okay.
I think they need to go somewhere, that's correct, and I think in one of the upcoming building committee meetings, this is going to be, it's going to be taken up at that meeting as to what exactly needs to stay with the high school and what doesn't. The tricky bit here, typically with MSBA projects, we like to level every single project with the exact same square footage, and then you can compare apples to apples really easily. Some of these ad reno projects where you don't have to take down as much, but you want to build more, say, academic spaces, create different opportunities in different ways. That's why we're analyzing strategies and options, because some of the benefits of one option versus the other is you can get more non-high school program in it versus the other. And so these we've tried to bring out and say, like, this one has an allowance for non-high school space in the 21,000 square foot range. That doesn't get it all in, and so whatever's not there would have to be taken up. Like, for example, we're not showing like some components here. I don't know what's in, what's out. I don't want to make that claim right now because we haven't done it with the building committee, but we're showing space, and we're going to try to tackle that in an upcoming building committee because that really needs to be sorted out so that we can finalize the space summary and get you to how big the building is.
Just a question, when you build up and you add on new places, I'm assuming you'll have to light it up really well also, is that correct? So there'll be new lights everywhere?
Outside?
Yeah.
Sure. We'd have to look at all of that, would be a redesign and replaced. All of the outside would be redesigned. Obviously, they would have a site plan. They would have the lights of the site plan that would be part of it, and I'm assuming the lights would be modernized and sensitive to, like we do with our stadiums, where they don't let the lights bleed off. They're directed down, and that would be part of the design, and it would take shape. We're very early in the process, so it's going to be hard for us to answer very specific questions. It'll certainly be considered, all that stuff, but we're looking at kind of what to do with this building. And again, this is one of the renovation addition options. Yes, ma'am.
With a non-high school space, how does that affect, or the other way around, the MSBA funding?
Well, the MSBA is not a part of this project, so.
So absolutely no, sorry, I'm new to this. This is when I came tonight.
No.
Really, no money from the state?
No.
Thank you.
Yeah, I believe the high school's tried for 13 years or so, and not had favorable invitation, and then the Fox Hill's currently in the MSBA's program, and our projects team's knowledge, we have not seen the MSBA have two schools from a district in at the same time, and so like your best shot would be to wait for the full completed audit out of Fox Hill to even be considered for MSBA participation for this. Does anybody know the schedule for Fox Hill?
All 28 would be when the school opens, so audited probably sometime in
2 years after that, at
so
least.
probably 2030 would roughly when it would be. There's good and bad to being in the MSBA or not being in the MSBA. The good is obviously the funding that you get, but they're very prescriptive in terms of square footage, timeline, design, everything else like that. So with renovation on a very tricky site, we'll have more options to consider, obviously, and the cost will be part of that. So again, just moving on, this is a ad reno, another one of the options, and I think we want to try to get to all of them. We can go back to any of them that you have questions on.
Yeah, and I think this is kind of the last ad reno associated with this specific building that we're showing, and I just, no ad reno comes they don't come without consequences, and so it's a lot of, there's a lot of cost to them, and then there's a lot of non-monetary cost, which is the student experience, the teacher experience, and the community experience around that duration of time. And so it's not to be taken lightly, and this building in particular is a hard building to deal with in that term. So the next one is AR9, and this is the building, this is the project looking at an available vacant building across Cambridge Street. And we use that as the example because it is actually vacant and it is available. And there may be others in town, and so the building committee is actually considering this very heavily because it is built space that you can move into. This one is actually almost gutted. It has a quite extensive and impressive build out for professional world-class lab space associated with it already, which you might be able to maintain as a high school program. And so there's a lot of interesting components about this particular building. If the building committee goes down a road of saying that's an interesting idea, let's see if there's any others out there, then that'll be a process of its own. But just for the sake of comparison and proof of concept, this building has been looked at. We've visited it twice, looked at it, got CAD plans. And this option shows you that, you remember earlier I mentioned that the high school space summary to accommodate 1,100 students, which is based on enrollment trends and projections, produces about 222,000 square feet of space. This building is about 110,000 square feet on 3 floors, and so that's the red area right here in the middle. And so if we took that building, we would just basically need to double it by adding a sister building associated with it on the side. So that means half your building's already built for you and you just need to do interior stuff, fit out, and then the other half of the building would be new, and probably the larger program spaces like auditorium or gym or things to support the education program within it. But this would be a complete high school program dedicated and I should say isolated, but by itself. No non-high school education programs go with it unless the committee decides to push that into this kind of project in an upcoming building committee meeting. But this is kind of an option look at that and how that might work. On the right, you can see some of the initial space summary or space planning diagrams using all 3 floors and kind of making an addition there. And so still very preliminary, but has a lot of promise to it and reutilizes some already existing assets within the town. So we're studying that. I think there's more to be studied on that to really get to the bottom of it. Yeah.
We'd have to decide that. This, I think you're absolutely right, though. This would be separate from this building. We'd have to decide what to do with the town. Would have to decide to do what to do with this building. The auditorium in the gym, again, the building here was open in 1970. There were 2,000 students in it, so the 370,000 square feet was based on the enrollment at the time. The auditorium is sized for the enrollment at the time. So if we were to build, obviously for 1,100 students, there wouldn't be an auditorium this size or even a second gymnasium. So there may be some benefits to, again, keeping some of the facilities that we have at the size that we have, and that's what the building committee is sort of looking at moving forward. This is obviously looking at, there's not very many 240,000 square foot open spaces for us. This happens to be half of that we are looking at, and again, there may be others that we are looking at too. We're just trying to be as creative as possible, looking at how many options that we may have. This does not address the current building you're in or some of the other deficiencies that currently exist.
So with this being available, town doesn't own it though. So we'd be acquiring commercial property, which would mean not only the cost to acquire it, but then do we know what impact that would have on possible tax implications, no longer having that viable for a business or businesses to come in?
Again, that would all be studied, so we'd have to have all those numbers together, and that would be part of the package, but both of those questions were brought up and already considered. The building is vacant now, so I'm not sure it's generating as much tax revenue as it could be, and also people's work lives have changed in terms of going into work or not going into work. So again, we're just trying to cover every option because we were predicting someone would ask the question, why haven't you considered one of the buildings that exist in town already? So we are certainly doing that, looking at the build-out cost, the purchase or even potentially lease cost, and the revenue impact of those buildings moving forward. So we thought the town would appreciate an option included in what we are studying. So.
The next option is a new option, and if you look at the diagram on the right, it's putting a building in the student lot, or on the student lot. It's a unconventional shape, I would say, for a school building. The challenge with the site, if you didn't know, but you kind of saw it in the video a little bit, was that there's a lot of wetlands on this site, and there's a lot of setbacks. There's actually currently a tangential process going on with conservation right now relative to this site that we initiated so that we can understand and come to an agreement with conservation on the wetlands markings, on the flags on where they are, and then that way we can know precisely where the setbacks are. The first take on this option, if you can look here, this dark green or more, saturated green line, was the wetland scientist flagging bounds for wetland, and so then you have to go out from that, the prescribed distance, and there's a 50-foot, and then there's 100-foot, and within the different zones you can do different things. And so we really tried to, and then there's another wetland here on the other side of the road, there's wetlands over here. So what we've tried to do is squeeze a building in around all of the wetlands that are there, just because people are going to ask. They're going to say, what about all this stuff? How do we mitigate that? The conversation with conservation is, if the building doesn't want to be that shape, can we take over some wetlands and then recreate them somewhere else? And how do we deal with all of these components from a site development issue? And so this one was left on the table, again, as a high school only solution. And everything to the left of it would have to be figured out by the committee in terms of what do we do with this building. Some of the components would create some symbiotic relationships, I'm sure. So like maybe the gym down there is more of a PE gym, and then you have the competition gyms that could stay here. There's different pluses and minuses to this one, and it definitely creates some hurdles that are going to have to be figured out in the PSR process, some of which may make this option go away. So.
And how would you route the traffic coming in off of the highway on that?
So we see it as traffic coming, and these are kind of initial ideas too, right? So we can see traffic probably coming in this way and then looping around and back out for drop-offs. Probably buses would come in and go around the back just so they're separated, and then you might have a teacher lot up here or a staff lot, and then you would still have the lots that are back in this area, and we would probably need to think about some more parking somewhere. Maybe it's structured. We don't have all the answers figured out yet because it's early, but these are the things we're going to have to figure out during PSR. And again, at any point in time as we study these options, these things like those questions, the building committee may be like, that's a non-starter, we can't go past that line, so this one will just come off the table or something. So this one's got some work to do to make it to the end. So
again, benefit to this though is no swing space is needed, no modulars are needed because it's new construction.
Yep.
And there's no parking. Kids will take the bus. So there you go.
No parking for a while. That's the floor layout. Okay, so NC4 and NC5, I'm going to group those together because I don't want to get too bogged down on the differences between the two, because they really are kind of a expression one and the same. The idea that we're going after here is building a building on the current varsity field. And so we've come up with two different options, two different building expressions that could fit in that zone. This is 5 NC5, and one of the ideas here is with 5 is that we could create some community relationship to Cambridge Street, because you can build like, you can build down low, and then as the building rises, you can actually connect up to the curb line and kind of fill in the fabric there to create a presence, because this building would be 4 stories tall just to fit on this side. This one's got optimal solar orientation, which means you can get a better sustainability reaction to it. So like, like the passive stuff you want to put in modern buildings now. And then this option is just a different shape and different kind of thinking around it, but both options are viable. And so we're looking at these as a strategy. It shows up as 2 options when we say there's 5, but I think really the building committee is going to say which one do we like the best, and it's just 2 options on the field. And so then naturally everybody's question is, what do we do with the field once we take it offline? And the similar question to that we have with a few of these options is, what do we do with this building if we build something new or go across the street or anything like that? We don't want to just leave a 300,000 square foot building empty with the town to deal with, or mothball, or whatever you would say. And so in doing this exercise, we had this idea that said, well, what if we went back to some of the strategies and took out the middle of the building, of this building, which is actually the most problematic part from getting from the top to the bottom, and we put a new stadium between the upper right-hand side here, which is all of your field house components. You come out of that level and it's a playing field, and then you can go up. I'll just go to the next slide here. This is the existing gyms and playing fields, so that's down in this section. And then you come out across as a sports field. You can see the background is that would all be demolished. And then you kind of come up the hill a little bit, and it's another flat plaza zone that leads to the non-high school education spaces like district admin and things like that. And so it creates this really interesting facility that kind of ties everything together nice and neatly, and also gives you a new high school. So it emerged as an idea. You can also, we're showing that because of the way this works, and there's a building, there's a level underneath where this is, you actually can get more parking below the field as you sort of level the field out and create structure there. And so has a lot of benefits to it, and it's, it's not simple, but is an interesting way to deal with the complexities of the site in a way that addresses the high school program. With that, those are the options. I'm going to flip back to the front page here on the at a glance so that you can see where we're at with the 5. And again, it's the AR2, which is the addition straight off to the side, the AR8, which is the triangle addition, the one across the street, the one on the student parking lot, the 2 on the field, and then the field modification to this building goes with the 2 on the field. And so I think with that, I've kind of talked you through some of the options. There's a lot more in-depth conversation recorded on these with the building committee conversations. But if there's any other questions related to the options, we can entertain those for a minute.
So you're looking to narrow down to one choice in March of 25, which is about 4 months from now. Do you have cost information that you can show us on that? And if not, how is it that you're narrowing down already without that information?
Yeah, part of the PDP, we had cost information. We didn't bring that tonight. I could pull that up if it's helpful.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fundamental to understanding which of these makes sense.
Okay.
Yes, that information is available, and it is on the website, and I know what one of the folks was looking for, so that will be in the SBC meeting pack that we did last week. That is on the website, but Chris will pull that up here, and it will give you ranges of costs that we do. So what happens is all of those options have a square footage associated with them. That's what drives the costs, and so it goes to an estimator. The estimators are working on all high school projects, middle school projects throughout the Commonwealth, so they have a really good handle on what dollar per square foot space costs, and then they account for site work and, you know, a whole host of other elements. That comes up to a number, and then what we do at this stage is we provide a plus or minus of 10%, just to say this is the range of where this option likely is going to fall, and so hopefully we can get that pulled up here, and I think that will provide some color.
Take another question.
Yeah, no, and I can tell you just from looking at it, you know, the renovation of this entire building, right, R1, will be the most expensive option to perform. And it will also, in my opinion, having done this at a separate school, cause the most amount of disruption to the children, the students, the parents, the teachers, the administrations, because effectively what you do is you take one section of the building and you renovate it, and you start hopscotching the kids around because you don't have swing space. And so we would also have to bring some modular classrooms, which, you know, we really kind of want to avoid if we can, because it's kind of lost money. You have to pay for them, and at the end they go away. So that's where we are on that. And then with each of the other ones, they're space summaries that translate into dollars. And so I don't know, we might be able to get it up on Rachel's computer. Oh, you got it. Okay. Martha.
Yeah, I just want to add on the costs. It is a big range. But when they find the document that shows the different costs, some of those options include the central office space, the preschool space, the BCAT space, et cetera. Some of those options don't. They are different square footages. So they're not exactly apples to apples. So again, the school building committee hasn't gotten into all the details, but it's just, these are broad ranges.
Okay. This should be 2 pages, I think. Yep. Okay. All right, let me walk you through how this spreadsheet works. This is a way to compare, and first of all, we need to put the caveat on this, that these are numbers that are intended to compare project to project, not necessarily an indication of what the final project cost is going to be. And so Terry was mentioning this, we're pretty far out. I usually talk about it in terms of like, when you see forecasters talking about hurricanes and they give you, the closer you are to the actual day, they kind of know where it's at. And then the further you're away, the wider the cone gets. We're really far away from where we want to be at the end of the day. All of these numbers, we had a cost estimator, an independent cost estimator that does this across the state on probably almost every high school project in one form or another. Look at this and do estimates. They gave us back a number, and then our project team went and applied what's called soft costs. This is a 25% multiplier, which includes things like contingencies for unknowns, or project team costs like OPM, engineering, legal fees, advertising, anything like that. We also included a 10% range of plus or minus, because that's where we are. That establishes the cone. And then all of these pricing, not that it's super critical right now, but it assumes a CM at risk delivery method, which is different than design bid build, which has some upfront implications, but typically provides a different method of delivery. So we think that feels, especially for a really complicated addition renovation on a building like this, that is the best thing to assume at this point. The building committee will take that up as a decision point once you get a little bit further down the road. A little bit of the nuts and bolts here is the concept that we just talked through is on the left in the column. The phasing is in the second column, talking just about some of the nuances around how many phases, how long it might take, if there's swing space required in the form of modular buildings. And then the next column is about, I don't know if I still have my, this column here is about non-high school space that's assumed included. And so some of them, like AR9, assumes that all the non-high school program remains in this building or elsewhere in town. And then others include, like the renovation includes it all, or some include various amounts of that. And again, that column is going to be refined during PSR based on a conversation with the building committee. Duration over here, you can see most projects are going into the 2029 range, potentially 2030. You get a gross square footage, and then right here you see the construction cost. This is the plus or minus 10% from the opinions that were delivered to us by the cost estimator, and then the red numbers are the project cost. And so at a high level, you can see that first chart at the very top is any renovation is going to be, we think, reasonably predictable in the range of $300 to $363 million. The addition renovations are, start less than that, but then go about the same amount. And then the replacement schools are anywhere from 176 to 371. The one caveat to that is that the $176 million one, which was N2, was taken off the table because it was an academic-only solution. Again, trying to turn over all the options and say, what if we put an academic-only building over on the student lot and then required students to come from that building over to this one to access things like music and sports and stuff like that. And I see people shaking their head, and I agree, but you have to do the exercise to turn it over because someone might have an opinion that that's a good idea. And so we did that, but it really doesn't meet the needs of the district or what's ideal for a high school. And so the building committee took that off the table. And then on this page, you can see the the new build 5 options. And, just to note, the ones that are on the table are AR2, which is 28 to 345, AR8, 24 to 299, AR9, which is across the street, 201 to 243. That does not include the purchase price of the building and does not include dealing with this building. So you got to remember that. And then the N5, N4, those are all going to be in the sort of high 2s to mid 3s range. And so these are the cost data that came with the PDP submission and things that we were talked about with the building committee, and helped, I think, color some of the conversation at the last meeting. So.
Yeah, so we're addressing that. This information is definitely in the presentation that was given last Thursday, so I think it's number 11 in the committee, in the community, the SBC meetings.
Yeah, it is in the meeting ones, but I've spent a lot of time also on Lexington's high school building project website, and their stuff is just so much easier to find. It's so much better organized, all the documents and things like that. So I really would love to see the website be improved because, between Fox Hill and then this is substantial information that our town needs to be able to access very easily. People who may not be very familiar with navigating a website my life is in the digital world, and I found it very difficult to navigate, so I think that'll be an important aspect. In terms of this matrix, will there be a deeper level criteria matrix built out for the community prior to the March decision?
You mean like decision points other than just cost?
Like the Lexington High School one is, they have a full criteria matrix of every single option with, I don't know, 130 rows in an Excel sheet of everything that goes into consideration, from the size of the site to what happens to basketball courts to what happens to the parking lots. I think it has a full-blown, very deep criteria that I think would be nice to see before March.
Yeah, so the plan that we're working on right now, we just finished PDP. PSR does do what you're talking about. And so we're creating the matrix that then drives what decisions go into every single committee meeting that we're going to have between now and then. And then at the end of that, you kind of complete the matrix and sort of, you've gone over all the information, and now you can fill out like how it affects, like, is this favorable or is it not favorable? And that helps lead people to, it doesn't make the decision for you, but gives you the insight that you might need. So, yeah.
And just to further answer that question, we're also the OPM on the Lexington job, and so in terms of the financial information, in terms of that list of, call it anywhere from 50 to 80 to 100 different line items, yes, that is a portion of that, and the numbers that are driven here probably have about, I think, 15 to 18 lines, because that's what drives the estimator, but that gets blown out through PSR, so you are going to see that level of detail.
I think it would be helpful for the community to see the cost of the ones that are staying put. So the BECC, BCAT, the space is going to have to be renovated in some sort, and is that included in these estimates? Because that is going to be a cost to the community if they're going to be staying put. So saying it's 176, but we didn't include this, that, or the other thing, and we're going to have to pay for that, isn't really giving us the proper numbers.
And also, you had your community outreach at a beer garden. I'm just wondering what other big public forums you're going to have. Tonight was also the marijuana one. I know a lot of people went to that. So as far as the neighborhood surrounding the high school, the first inkling I got that the stadium was going to be in the middle of all of our whole neighborhood is tonight.
This is the first one. And we're never going to keep the marijuana. So it's just not going to.
So, and I can understand the question, and I think, you know, someone mentioned previously, there has been a lot going on in the community, not just with this project, but probably more in the focus of Fox Hill and the police station. And I think there was a deliberate decision to try and not cloud those projects with this one. I think there was an acknowledgement at the last couple of town meetings that folks have known that the high school is coming, and we deliberately sort of let those projects run their course. When it comes to community engagement, you know, two of the options that we've put forth have really been developed over the last, I want to say, 4 or 5 weeks, and so the fact that you're learning of that tonight doesn't surprise me. The building committee learned of this option 7 days ago, of having the ability to build a football field in between that buildings. You're not a fan of that one? Understood.
Because within 50 yards, there's a community.
Mm-hmm.
I realize this may be something some people don't want to hear, but it's the truth. This is an incredible project that should have been done years ago, and we all know that. And holding off and not letting the public know about this along with Fox Hill, to me, is a mistake, because I'm just looking at tax dollars and how are we going to afford this? And we need a new high school that, and I think you said 1,100 students this high school is going to be able to accommodate. Is that correct?
Correct.
Versus 352 students. That's all I'm going to say.
Just talk.
I had a question about R1. Where did you guys, how much time did you guys put into other options beside modulars? We see that as an option, but trying to use the existing space that we have, for instance, we have one of the largest phys ed areas in the state, I think, and turning areas into temporary classrooms down there. Has that been talked about at all, or where do you guys have that valuation that you're coming up with?
Using some of the existing building space that we have, like the rubber gym, one of the gyms, and instead of getting modulars, turn that into temporary classroom space. So more of a look at renovating the existing building. Again, I would say there probably could be some techniques that we could look at. One of the issues with renovating the existing building is you're renovating a design that isn't very conducive to educational programming today. So a renovation is going to be very expensive, very timely, very disruptive, and at the end, we still may have a bunch of different floors. It's still going to be a difficult building to operate in. So I think that's one of the things that the building committee discussed, is this was a great design, functioning really well, but just 58 years old at the end of its useful life, and a renovation would deliver us a sort of a highly accessible, well-functioning building. I think that would be a different conversation. So we're certainly looking at that. And again, historically, Sharon, I agree that we're looking at multiple projects, but please, historically, Fox Hill was open in 1968. This building was open in 1970. They were built at the same time, so we are looking at replacing them similarly. So they are both at the end of their useful life. So.
Just to give some perspective from the committee also, so one of the reasons I was voting for removal of R1, it was the most disruptive. It had the longest swing space requirements, which is just sunk cost, and then it delays the progress of the project. And I looked at it from an escalation year-over-year cost. Materials are only becoming more expensive, and to make the project go 48 to 50 months, now you're incurring, easily 5% year-over-year escalation for the total cost of the project, and that was one of the things that drove me to remove from the table pretty quickly.
I also think that the addition renovation projects that we did decide to keep looking at, one of the biggest problems, and Chris referenced this earlier, is that the center part of the building here has no windows. It's got the big ramps in the hallways that would have to be modified or changed and rebuilt, and would be expensive to rebuild to be ADA accessible. And when they first brought us a whole bunch of examples, I'm like, wow, we could take that whole section out and no more classrooms, and put that wing on, for example. So there'd be classrooms that would have windows and natural light and all that stuff, and we'd use that center space for something else, and that they found some creative ways to look at that. So that's another reason I didn't like the R1 option.
Thank you. Our star pupil, Millie, any comments? No? Ms. Nash participated in our last building committee meeting, so she gets a gold star for that. They're public meetings. You're all welcome. Hearing you that we need to do more of these sessions, then we will. I think we'll start to pick up some momentum, especially when people start seeing the numbers. I think the numbers are very large, and the impact is significant, so I think we'll get more interest. It's not for a lack of wanting to do these things. We'll certainly do them. And if we need to have a certain criteria, if Lexington has 100, we will create 101, just so everyone feels good, and we will have one more criteria.
So what's behind me is just a list of actually meetings that are scheduled with the school building committee and a couple of additional community sessions. What I will tell you is that we also intend to use, I don't know if anyone's familiar with Thought Exchange. Thought Exchange is a software program that the district has invested in, and it's a way of going out to the community and basically getting various forms of feedback. So there could be open-ended questions, it could be closed questions, it could be survey-type questions. And so the intention is to go out there and to obtain feedback from people, collect that, organize it, and then put it back out to the community so that people can see what the general will of the community is and what the highlights are, what the concerns are. And so, you know, I'm going to be working with Eric and the school building committee to do that over the course of the next couple of weeks. And then, you know, as Eric says, you know, we're happy to have more and more meetings and you know, participating in school building committee meetings. You can participate remotely. You can attend the meetings, and you know, we welcome that participation. The meetings are in the school committee room on the other side of the building. And remote. So, you know, they're televised on BCAT. We have a WebEx link, and so you can easily just dial into any meeting.
I think we're approaching the end of time. Are there any sort of final questions or wrap up? With that, I'll turn it over to Catherine, Ms. Bond, if you want to close out. No. Our chair.
Again, I really want to thank all of you for taking the time to come this evening, and we do welcome you to attend the meetings, whether it's via WebEx or in person, or again, the next community meeting or whatever we post for questions for the community. We really do try to we have public, at the beginning of the meeting, at the end, we definitely give an opportunity for people to ask questions right off the bat. I do try to, during the meetings, ask if anyone online has questions. I do try to keep track of, you know, who's here, who's in person and who's not, so that everyone has a voice. So again, I just want to say thank you all for coming this evening. We hope to see you at future meetings, and thanks.